Thank you, Chairman. I'm going to try to do something that's probably impossible in the next 5 minutes, touch on and get y'all's perspective on 4 areas. The ability to detect. We've touched on, Mr. Duerman, you touched on authentication as a strategy for this. How do we develop a strategy in a narrow national security sense to counter disinformation, and who should be doing that? And then broadly, education. And my first question is probably to you, Mr. Clark and Dr. Duerman. Can you talk to us about the ability to detect and the forensics? Like, is there ability to do a pixel-by-pixel analysis, a bit-by-bit analysis? Is there other areas of basic research that we should be focusing on in order for us to help with an ability to detect?
Well, the approach that's being taken in the community is one of a comprehensive view. So yes, there are pixel types of applications, not necessarily pixel by pixel, but the metadata that you get on an image, you know what compression algorithms that were there. You know that there are residual information left if you take an image, you modify it, and you recompress it. So at the digital level, that's where a majority of the work is being done, and that's
how easy is that now, and who should potentially be doing that?
Well, the government is putting a lot of money into this piece. As I said, there's a lot more manipulators than there are detectors. I would hope that behind closed doors that the social media sites and the the YouTubes of the world are looking into this type of application, but I'm not sure.
Is the ability to understand the various metadata, or even getting to a point where we can do pixel by pixel exploration in mass, is that going to help us in a point where you can do real authentication? So anytime you put a video up or a picture up, there's a green check mark.
Personally, I don't like to use the word authentication because, as we know, absolutely everything that goes up online is modified in some way, whether it's cropped or there's a color histogram distribution adjustment. But it's not things. Well, we like to use that things have been modified, but it's a scale. So if there's a modification of intent, if you put a flower in a picture next to someone, that has a very different effect than if you replace somebody's face in a picture. And so this discussion, this attribution piece, and the actual report that says this is exactly what was done was a big part of the Metaphor program as well.
So the closest you're going to get is say all of these things happen to this image, and therefore the user would have to be the one to make the decision on whether this is credible or not.
Yes, and even in an automated way, if you are taking an image and you're the FBI and you're going to court, even if you did change 1 pixel, you lose the credibility.
Gotcha.
But if you're doing an FBI and you're doing an investigation and you have a very compressed, grainy surveillance video, it still might give you information, you believe it.
Ms. Citron, and then maybe Mr. Watts, disinformation is a subsection of covert action. Covert action and counter-covert action is a responsibility of the Central Intelligence Agency. Yet the Central Intelligence Agency, because the National Security Act of '47, can't do covert action in the United States of America. Very hard to do it in English. How should we be looking at a government strategy to deal with disinformation, especially in the context of national security? Or is somebody else more appropriate to start with that?
I think it's 2 parts. I would encourage the social media industry and the platforms to focus on methods. Who's doing deepfakes, digital forgeries? Who's doing computational propaganda? Can we have a listing of those? They're not always nefarious, but then we know who the people are that are building the equipment. This is essentially the weapons that are being used. And I would encourage the government then to focus on actors. So this is in the case of the CIA oversees DHS in terms of protecting the homeland, who are, State Department, which used to have the U.S. Information Agency, would be out there outing and overtly going after those actors that are doing the manipulation. I feel like we are still, after several years now, really slow to do this. And they're the only ones that can figure it out. When I have worked with social media teams and we spot actors that we believe are doing things, we sometimes have to wait years for the government to go, yes, here's the Mueller report, and it labels the Internet Research Agency. But that had already been out in the news. So the more rapidly the government can do that, the more the public can help, the more the social media companies know what to take down, because that attribution really only comes down to the U.S. government. They're the only ones, the tools really, that can do that.
Good copy. Thank you. Chairman, I yield back.